Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field.
Podcast is the Ben Thinking Podcast, and we have a very special guest yet again, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian. We've had the opportunity to speak to a couple different registered dietitians in the past, and we had the opportunity to speak to another with some new perspectives around nutrition, health, and fitness, and also how to run a business. And so you're going to see a couple cats if you are watching the video, kind of hanging around here and there. I have 3 cats in the room today, and so I appreciate you being patient with me, and hopefully you like cats. And hopefully they don't jump on my computer just like that. So, Leonilla, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you so much for having me.
My first question at the very top is I have a coffee here. I think it's something that we very often drink that's in our culture very deeply. And I'm adding stuff to my coffee, stuff like lion's mane, ashwagandha, alpha GPC. What are things that I perceive these things to be some good additives for my morning start? But are these really a good additive for my morning? And then if not, what are some good alternatives?
Yeah, such a great question. These are your adaptogens, right? And so there is a lot more research coming up now around that. And so most of the research shows positive things, right? That it does help with our stress. It helps with our brain function, right? More of a focus and clarity. And so it's something that we can definitely add to our coffee, right? If that is something that we're looking at. I'd rather use those versus an energy drink, right? Because we know that the effects of the energy drink, essentially, it is more, even though we're having coffee, right? It's not as significant, the stimulation, right, in our cardiovascular health. And so, and it's more, it's not, with our energy drinks, right, you're going to have these increase in heart rate, right? Because it is a stimulant. And so, but when we think about our physiology, our hearts are not meant to be pumping for a long period of time, right? It needs a rest. And so our cardiovascular system is going to try to bring those levels down, right? Because naturally it sees it as, okay, we can be doing this to our heart. And so with these other adaptogens, right, or with these adaptogens, we don't see that it's increasing our heart rate in comparison to our energy drinks. And so if it's helping us with our focus, right, it's helping us with being more awake, I think that is definitely a healthier option.
Very nice. I mean, ideally, I'm just having good sleep, getting good workouts, drinking enough water that I don't really need those items. Is kind of what it sounds like. But as somebody who drinks way too much caffeine every single day, I think it in my head, it makes me feel better whenever I drink this adaptogen kind of mixed coffee. So I get a little bit of the caffeine, I get some mental clarity. I know alpha GPC right now is being researched for its use with Alzheimer's and cognitive function. And so, and there's also some athletic performance research behind alpha GPC as well that I really kind of enjoy. And so if I know I'm going to go work out later, I know I'm looking for maybe I'm going to learn a new skill today, or I'm going to be working on technique. I want that kind of focus, but also the ability to be to learn really, really quickly. And so alpha GPC and lion's mane show to do those two things really, really well. And so, but ideally, I'm just sleeping and drinking enough water. Is that right?
Right. So, and I often hear this often, right? I'm so tired. I need, either a high amount of caffeine or something to wake me up. But then we're not really addressing the root cause, right? Which is a lack of sleep, either the quality of sleep or the quantity of sleep, right? If we fix those issues or that root cause, right, we should be able to have more energy throughout the day, unless if we're not fueling ourselves properly. So then that's the second aspect of it. But for the most part, right, if we address that, we should have enough energy throughout the day.
I wear my Whoop pretty much every night now. I stopped wearing it for a while, and now I'm back at it. And I think it's really helpful to see some feedback on, okay, how am I really feeling today, and then how does that correlate with maybe my sleep performance, and then how can I improve those things? What are some recommendations that you would have from a nutrition standpoint? Maybe timing of eating, if that matters, and then maybe some other practices to help increase sleep quality and maybe duration as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about the digestion of food, right, it is a thermogenesis. Um, what's the word? Like we produce heat, right, when we digest food. And so if we're having a heavier meal, right, an hour to 2 hours before we go to bed, there could be a possible disturbance, right, to our sleep. But also that you mentioned the timing, right? Sometimes I have clients that say, "Oh, I go to sleep hungry," right? Or because they're doing like a really extreme calorie deficit, and they're waking up in the middle of the night because they're hungry, right? And so the timing definitely matters. And so ideally, right, we want to be able to have our last meal about 3 hours before we go to bed, just to have enough time to digest food. But also, right, when we think about um, the sustainability of energy, right? We want to have that combination of protein, whole grains, right, or our complex carbohydrates, some healthy fats, right, to have that sustainability of energy, but also of blood sugars. And so with that combination, and ideally we want to be able to do that throughout the day, right, because it helps again with that stability of blood sugars, of energy. And so instead of having like these roller coasters, right, we have more of that sustainable energy source. There are some foods that are higher in magnesium, and magnesium has been shown that it can also help and aid with sleep, right? And so if we think about our nuts, our seeds, if we think about our bananas, right, which are also great in potassium, kiwis, and so that adding some of those foods to, right, not necessarily at the end of the day, but maybe throughout the day, can also help with better sleep. And then a huge one, and some people say, it doesn't affect me at all. For some people, it does. The timing of when we have our last cup of coffee, right, or caffeine in general. Most research that I have read, right, it says no later than 2 or 3 p.m., right, because can definitely affect our circadian rhythm. It can affect our sleep. But again, for some people, it's like, I have a cup of coffee at 7 p.m. and it doesn't affect me at all. So it really, I get so individualized, right? So, but yeah, looking at those things too.
I wish I was the person that could go to dinner and have, a cappuccino with my dessert and not have disrupted sleep. But unfortunately, I definitely will. Anything after like 3 or 4 o'clock for me is right about where I'll start feeling it. Like last night was one of those nights for me where I drank a caffeine a little bit later in the day, and it was harder for me to sleep. Right, and so um, making sure that I keep my energy levels high throughout the day is important, right? I have a lot of meetings. I meet with different clients, podcasting. And so sleep is, I think, more in my life right now, a loud factor in my performance as a business owner.
Right. It makes a huge difference, especially when you have all these meetings and mentally, like we have to be present, right? And not only being present, right? Like we have to listen and we have to understand the information and make decisions, right? And so, yeah, sleep definitely plays a huge role in so many aspects of our lives.
It's pretty awesome. I love it. I love sleep. And if I could just sleep in every single day until whatever time I wanted, that would be the ideal situation. But we're not there just yet. So hopefully one day. And so, what is your process like whenever you are looking at a new client? I mean, how detailed are we getting? Are we taking blood work and stuff like that? Do you have access to those kind of items whenever you are working with somebody? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So, my initial appointments, right, usually are at least 60 minutes. I have some patients that we've gone almost 3 hours. And so
Wow.
we really we go in depth, right? of course, if there are labs, I absolutely go over the labs, right? If there's anything in particular that we have to focus on. And then I ask tons of questions, right? From, initially, what are your goals, right? What you want to get out of today's session, because I want to make sure that I'm on the same page as them, right? So sometimes even when I get referrals from other health professionals, right, or doctors, for whatever the case may be, let's say cholesterol. And maybe the patient is like, yeah, I want to work on cholesterol, but I also have these other issues, right, that I want to focus on. So I think understanding that and understanding, what the patient or what the client wants makes a huge difference. And then from there, right, I ask questions about food allergies, food intolerances, because my recommendations essentially, I want to tailor them, right, considering all those factors too. And we talked about sleep, right? Sleep's a huge one. We talk about that. Quality of sleep, quantity of sleep, right? Possible reasons why is it that we're not sleeping. We talk about stress. Stress is also a huge one with my clients, and so we talk about what are the stressors? How can we manage stress, right? I often refer my patients to other health professionals, right? Therapists, psychologists, because for the majority of the time that it's going to be a root cause of the issues, right, that we have. And so if we are not able to address them, we almost are only doing like treating the symptoms per se, right? And so I want to be able to make sure that my clients get the support that they need, right, at different levels. So we talk about that, right? I of course go over nutrition, right? What are your nutrition patterns during the week, on the weekend, right? Because it makes a difference. We talk about cravings, right? Oftentimes that's a huge one too. So we go over cravings. We go over exercise. Exercise is also another factor, right, for overall health. And so if we're not doing anything, right, in terms of movement, giving them super simple goals, right, things that they're willing to try. Walking, right? Sometimes they think that, I need to go to the gym for 3 hours. Okay, no, let's scale it down, right? But if I have someone, right, that is like, what, I've been thinking about going to the gym, I just don't know where to start, then I refer them to personal trainers. Sorry,
No, it's
it escaped
okay.
my mind. I was going to say physical therapists, but personal trainers, right? Because I want to make sure that if they don't know where to start, they start somewhere where it's healthy, and also they're doing the safer things, right? Not like, let's just go and lift heavy. Okay, no, let's be smart about it, right? Let's connect with the professionals and make sure that you get the resources that you need. And we talk about medications and supplements that they might be taking. And then we talk about a plan, right? Let's create a plan together to make sure that you create these goals that are sustainable and realistic for you, and I provide the resources that you need, right? For some clients, maybe, okay, let's start, tackling breakfast, right, or lunch. And there, I have clients that say, you know what, I do better with you telling me what to eat, like give me a meal plan and I can follow it, right? And what I usually tell, because I do get that often, about meal plans, and so I tell them we are going to change this meal plan every 2 to 3 weeks, right? Because I want to make sure that, number one, the first meal plan that I'm giving you is a baseline, right? It's just I'm calculating your needs based on what the information that I have, and then I need feedback, right? So once we follow it for those 2 to 3 weeks, I want to see where we're at, and then based on that, with the next meal plan, I can either adjust, or if we see progress, then we'll just keep it as is, right, and adjust as necessary. But when I think about nourishment too, right? If we only eat certain food, let's say 4 foods, right? We are only getting the nutrients from those 4 foods. So there's no variety, right? We need a variety of nutrients, and so for overall well-being. And so by adding different foods, that's how we can get that nourishment. And so then we come back, right? And then we'll see where we're at that time. But essentially, right, it is a collaboration, right? Yeah, I am the expert here, right? Or I am the professional here, but each person is essentially the professional in their own lives, right? And what's going to work for them. And so coming together and creating a really strong plan, right, that is going to work for them, makes sense to me. And I always ask them, rate your confidence level, right, at these goals that we're setting. From a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no, I'm not confident at all, and 10 is I'm 100%. And so I usually, if I have someone that is at a 6, okay, let's figure out how to make these goals simpler, right? Let's simplify them, because I want them to be either a 7 or 8. 10 is usually like, okay, of my overachievers there, but I want them to be around a 7 or 8, right? Because then that's telling me that, okay, I'm comfortable, I have the resources that I need, I'm able to execute the plan. And if they're not, right, okay, let's simplify it, right? It's okay. This is a journey, right? It's a process. It's okay that it's going to take some time. So that's usually how the first appointment goes, for the most part.
I like it. That's very detailed. I think I really appreciate you going into that level of detail. I think about the way that I outsource any sort of diet needs for my clients or for my athletes. That is not my place. It's not my jam. And so I've worked with a couple here in town, and I think hearing the way that you approach it makes me feel like, oh, like I would definitely want to refer out to someone like you. That's definitely um, sounds like they take the time, they understand the detail, and they also make it unique to the individual. And then like the adjustments every 2 to 3 weeks is really cool. If the adjustments are necessary, I think those are really neat. And also remembering like, hey, we can't just eat the same thing over and over and over again for, and to the end of time. Like we have to have variety in our lives. And so what is there like a general, I don't know if this is real. Generalities are always kind of tough. But is there a general number of different fruits, proteins and stuff that I should eat? I mean, I try to get like a beef, a pork, a fish, and and a chicken every single week. And if I'm going to go out to the restaurant, I think, okay, what have I eaten like the last 3 meals, and what would be different today, right now? Still clean, still like whatever. But like that's how I make my decisions a lot of times. But how necessary is that?
Right. Yeah. So I think if throughout the week we're adding a variety of foods, right? There's not really like a magic number as to like, okay, I want you to eat, 5 green foods, right? Or whatever. But as I think when it comes to making these balanced meals, right? And I'll explain a little bit what that is, because oftentimes we use that, freely, and people are like, I don't know what that is. So we have like essentially everything that we eat kind of falls into these 5 food groups, right? We have our fruits, our vegetables, our grains, right? Like rice, pastas, tortillas, noodles, oatmeal, and then we have our protein sources, chicken, beef, fish, turkey, eggs, egg whites, and your plant sources, edamame, tofu, tempeh, all that. And then we have our dairy, milk, yogurt, cheese, or our high calcium, high vitamin D foods, right? There are some specifics in terms of nutrients, right, that we should get according to the USDA, the United States dietary guidelines. And so in order to get those 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium, right, in our vitamin D, we do need to get about 3 servings of dairy or 3 servings of high calcium, high vitamin D foods. And that's to get those nutrients, right? But when it comes to protein, carbohydrates, that's a little bit more independent, right? Because it depends on our activity level, right? It depends on our age, it depends on our goals. But just in general, right, there is a recommendation for fish, at least of your fatty fish, salmon, sardines, tuna, mackerel, at least 2 times a week because of the omega-3, right? Your DHA and your EPA. And so we want to get those sources at least 2 times a week. And the rest of the week, we can add a variety, right, of your animal sources, your plant sources, whatever it is that you're wanting to add. Fiber-wise, right, there is also a recommendation for fiber. For women, right, we want to get about 25 to 28 grams of fiber a day. And for men, it's about 30 grams or so. In fiber, you're going to find it in all your plant sources, right? Your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, your nuts, and your seeds. So if you add a variety of those foods, you should be able to get that amount of fiber. And so when it comes to visualizing that, right, about 2 cups of vegetables at each meal, right, will give you, I don't know, about 5 to 7 grams. And then, your fruits in between, maybe 2 to 3 fruits in between, right, will give you some extra fiber too. Maybe you want to add ground flaxseed and chia seeds, right, to get some of that extra fiber too. And so there is definitely a way to add all these nutrients, but the way that we're going to be able to do it, right, is by adding more of these balanced meals. So making sure that we always have protein, we always have some kind of fiber, right, and then we decided we want to have, healthy fats, avocados or nuts or seeds, or we want to have, you know, a piece of fruit, right, or some other type of grains, or our high calcium, high vitamin D food, cheese, milk, yogurt. And then we get a variety of those foods, and that's how usually we're able to get our nutrients as well.
I think that this is super fun. Like this is obviously has been a part of my life for a long time, but I have clients that hear it and they're like, another thing to track. Oh my god, I have to worry about my meetings and my kids and my family and the workouts, and then now I need to think about, am I eating fish twice a week?
Right.
And I I understand how it can be overwhelming, but it also sounds like so long as there is variety, it is like rather simple to get there. Like the vegetable thing is kind of hard for me. I don't have a lot of veggies in my life, and so um, I can get fiber through like a supplement. If that's probably not as good as just as nutritious as what's it called, a an actual vegetable, but there's so many alternative ways to ultimately reach those goals of overall health, and it seems like it's becoming more and more important. Like things are just so unhealthy, and people are becoming are having a really hard time on this journey because the odds are not in your favor, if you will. There's everything around you. There's McDonald's around you. There's all these options that are ultimately not necessarily the healthiest for you, right? Like I love Takis, but I probably shouldn't be eating Takis, and that some people don't just they there is a food addiction that is a real thing, and so um, even though it is overwhelming, I think that it sounds like there's a lot of options for you to at least hit some general goals. Am I hitting it maybe twice a week? Am I eating fish twice a week? Maybe not. Am I hitting it at least once? Because you can do once, you can make sure that on Sunday you buy one piece of fish, like those are reasonable, I think, goals to set, general goals, but reasonable.
Right, absolutely. And it has to make sense, right? So when we think about how busy we are, and as you mentioned, okay, another thing that I have to track, right, or keep in mind, um, starting super simple, like you said, once a week. Okay, maybe this is something that I don't do. It's something that I want to make sure that I'm adding, right, because it is an essential nutrient. I'll start with once a week, right, on Sundays or Saturdays or whatever, and then go from there, right, and see how that works for you. But and I think you can agree with these, right? It's the consistency, right? Even as small as a goal can be, right? The consistency is what's going to matter because consistency is what's going to turn into a habit, right? And a behavior change. And so even if it's super small, still do it, right? Because it can definitely make a difference.
It makes a massive difference. I was working out yesterday, and um, I was looking in the mirror, and I was like, I don't, and this is something a lot of my clients will talk to me about. It's like, I thought I had to work out like 10 times a week and hit two a days and go for runs and sprints and lift really heavy. And like the program that we follow is like 3 to 4 days a week. One day is like stretching and cardio. And the other 3 days we're lifting, like we're having resistance training, but it's not like super intense. I'm in and out in an hour and a half if I really take my time. It's like you really don't got to do very much to make a lot of change. And I think that I see that in my own, as things continue to get busy, it's like I'm working out less, but I'm still in the gym consistently and I see this progress. Like this feels really good. And like other clients are seeing that as well. I think there's this inflated idea because of maybe the internet or gym bros or whatever it may be. That's just like, I have to, lift this type of way, or exist in fitness in this type of way, but that's not the reality of true, success in the gym. It truly is consistency.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is such a good point, right? When we think about just the idea of what clients have, right? Oh, I have to, lift so heavy and lift every single day, right, to see results. But no, actually, most health organizations, right, recommend strength training at least 2 times a week, right? If you can do extra, even better. And I think we are seeing that more and more where there is an emphasis in strength training for longevity reasons, right? For strengthening our muscles, for flexibility, for independence. Oh my goodness, I think that alone can make a huge difference because when you think about, okay, I don't want to be 65 years old and like asking for help, right? I think that independence plays a huge role in our decision making because when we think about, okay, do I want to depend on people all the time to be able to move or to be able to, go from my bed to the restroom? I want to say like at least 99% of the time, people are going to say, no, I want to have and keep my independence. But if we are not doing anything to do that, right, to maintain it, it's not just going to happen, right? As we age, we're losing muscle mass, right?
Yeah.
And severe muscle mass loss, which is called sarcopenia, is a mortality risk, right, for our elderly. And so if you fall and you didn't strengthen your muscles and your bones, that can lead, for you to be in the hospital for months and then into a rehab facility. And so when we just think about our independence and okay, I wanna get older, but still be strong and have my independence. I think that is just so powerful, right? And if we are able to do that now, which we should be starting, probably yesterday, but I like at least starting now, right? And it can make a huge difference in having the support, like you've been with being a personal trainer, right? And showing people, hey, this is what you can do because even if you're injured, right, you can still do so many other things in many ways and adjust. And we cannot really take that as an excuse.
Or we can learn how to rehab those things. So like we give people tools to say, oh man, the outside of my hip really hurts. Like maybe I don't necessarily need to know that this is like what tissue that is or what it necessarily does, but I can show somebody, hey, when this hurts, we do these things. And then that's a solution we found for you as a unique individual. Maybe somebody else, they need more stretching on the opposite side, or they need more, proprioception stuff on, it could be a whole number of different things, but ultimately, like we can find a set of tools that whenever you're at home or you're at the gym or whenever our relationship ends, you can still go to the gym and be confident that I can still do these things even though I don't know the details of them. You don't need to know the details of them. You just need to know when I do this, my hip no longer hurts. Like it's the classic story. I love that you bring up the independence thing because I think you phrased it really well. It's I always tell people, imagine, you're 65 years old. Like you've already seen how many grandmas or you have an uncle, you have an aunt, you have somebody in your life that you've seen, like they break a hip, then they're in the hospital, then they get some sort of, infection, and then they're in there for months and months and months, and then they have to go to rehab. By the time they get back into regular life, they can't walk very well. They're not practicing. They're not continuing their rehab. And all of this could have been solved if we would have just, started strength training a little bit earlier.
Right. Yeah. And, it is sad to see. I've worked at like different skilled nursing facilities. And just to see how someone can go, from being mobile or somewhat mobile to like being bedridden, right? And our bodies are meant to move. And so if you don't move, you're going to continue to lose muscle mass, right? And your strength and your flexibility and your balance. And so, um, I am so passionate about that, right? In terms of like, okay, we gotta move our bodies, right? We gotta be able to, even if it's, on a day-to-day thing, okay, let's pick some water jugs, right? Or let's do some, I don't know, something so simple that is gonna continue to help your body stay strong. But it also helps our brains, right? And so learning things and just exercising our brains too plays a huge role as well. And I think if I think if their focus was more on prevention, right? On, okay, let's make sure that our elderly get more exercise, right? Or there's, I don't know, I'm thinking like just overall, let's create programs, right, for them where they get more exercise. I have to tell you a quick story here. I have an almost 80-year-old client. And if you see her, you wouldn't be able to see that she's 80. So, but she's extremely active. She swims every single day. She bikes for 10 miles every single day. She goes to the gym and lifts, some heavy weights. And even when she's in pain, right? She has a lot of GI issues, and so she's in pain, and she's like, the only thing that helps me with the pain is moving. Even if I don't want to move, that helps me. So I always do it. I always, stay active. And she told me, that she went bike riding with a friend and she fell. And I was like, oh my gosh, did you break something? And she's like, no, surprisingly, I didn't break anything. Right. And so at her age, oftentimes you think, oh my gosh, yeah, she would have broken a bone if she weren't that active, right? If she wasn't doing strength training and just moving her body. And so it is extremely important to move our bodies for sure.
It's extremely important to move our bodies and then also make sure that they're well fed enough to accomplish the movements that we're asking them to do, right? Like I'm asking my body to, go for a 10-mile bike or to lift heavy weights. Like there are certain things that my body needs in order to do those things really well. And then the most important thing is to be able to recover from those things so that I can rebuild. We can see more and more that the recovery portion of our existence in the gym and our fitness journey is probably the most important part rather than the amount of damage that I do in the gym. If I can't recover from that damage, ultimately I'm going to end up like worst case scenario, I have like rhabdo, right? But with rhabdomyolysis, so breakdown of protein. And so, that's worst case scenario. But if I'm not able to recover well enough, that ultimately can create a chain of events where, man, I really don't want to sit down when I go to the restroom in the morning. I'm so sore. Like that soreness, sure, to some degree is maybe kind of to be expected moderately if I haven't like moved for a while. But at the same time, ultimately, that there's a buildup of all these hydrogen atoms that aren't being able to be flushed out by my bicarbonate system. So then now I'm just, I've worked way too hard for my body to be able to process and recover from. And now it's acidic, and now I'm inflamed, and now there's a chain reaction of reduced activity from that because I need more time to recover, which means there's less output, which means I'm eating right about the same to try to feel better and recover, but then having less calorie expenditure. Like it creates a cascade of effects that I think it often goes overlooked, but like the recovery portion is one of the most important pieces of our journey. And so making sure I have enough water, something so simple that I feel like almost nobody for whatever reason does, because it doesn't taste good or whatever. It tastes like water. It's good. Or having enough protein, right? I know like the conversation is probably like overstated all over social media. Like, am I getting enough protein? But it is rather important to make sure that I'm keeping the tissue that I have built and then keeping it healthy long term.
Right, absolutely. And you said it, on point. We only get fuel from one source, right? And that's our food. And so we have to choose, we have to decide, okay, do I want to fuel and nourish my body with the proper nutrition, right? To help me recover, repair, but also function throughout the day, right? Or do I want to continue to suffer and stay sore, right? Because of my food choices. And so it really makes a difference. And it doesn't have to be difficult, right? As we mentioned, prioritizing those foods, your protein, again, making more of these balanced meals, your your antioxidants, right, which are going to be your fruits and your vegetables, to help with that, help you more at a cellular level, right? It really makes a difference, because again, that's the only way we're gonna be able to get our nutrients, right? The first thing is food, and always, right, we want to be able to get most of our nutrients from food, and then we need to add a supplement, and that's secondary. But yeah, fuel is coming from our foods, right? It makes a difference, a huge difference in terms of recovery and how long it's going to take us to recover.
There's a lot of people on Ozempic right now, and I'm thinking, okay, they're having less nutrients in their diet. They're not able to eat as well or as much. What are some potential like long term effects of Ozempic? I mean, it is still so new, right? But semaglutide in general, or any of those derivatives, what are some like potential negative effects?
Right. Yeah. When it comes to nutrition specifically, right, nutrient deficiencies. So because it almost acts as bariatric surgery, right, where we have more of a surgical change in our stomachs, and we're eating very small amounts, right? So ideally similar to that, but it's non-surgical, it's a medication. And so if you're not supplementing, right, in this case, we definitely need the supplements because we're not getting enough nutrients from our food. And so there is going to be some deficiencies. And so in this, it's so important. And I hope that definitely more providers, more doctors work with a dietitian to make sure that those patients that are on these semaglutide or these other weight loss medications, that they get the support that they need from a dietitian, right? Because yeah, we're having this rapid weight loss, which when you think of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? But when we have this rapid weight loss, you're not only losing body fat, right? You're also going to lose your muscle mass, and if you're not exercising. And so then we have, again, that issue of sarcopenia, right? Now we're having an excessive muscle mass wasting. And so then we have these deficiencies. So when we look at long-term, right, that can affect, our minerals, right? So if we have low iron, we have vitamin D. The majority of the population is deficient in vitamin D, right? So looking really at those things. But when we think about digestion too, right, which is something that people also have issues with. Okay, I'm really nauseous, or I'm not able to use the restroom, right? I'm constipated, yeah, because of the slowing of the digestion. And so we really have to work on a case by case, right, and figuring out the proper treatment or the proper plan. But ideally, right, we still want to be able to prioritize our foods, and so protein, right? We wanna aim for protein first because we're losing massive amounts of weight, right, which is affecting our muscle mass. So protein first, then adding our vegetables, right, or our plant sources, and then the ideally, right, we want to make sure that we're not drinking and eating at the same time, right? But that's because more so of the expansion of the stomach. So if we're getting satiated really fast and then we're drinking lots of water, then you're essentially satiated because of that expansion of the stomach, not so much because you're nourishing your body, right? So separating our water intake, either before or after meals or in between meals, right, to make sure that we're getting the nutrients that our bodies need, before we fill up with water. But also we might have to add some smaller meals throughout the day, right? Because if we're not very hungry, right, and we wait, and now we want to have a bigger meal, most likely we're not going to be able to have that meal, right? Because we get satiated so fast. So
Yeah, that's definitely cool. Very nice. Very, very, I think, well stated, well summarized. Yeah, I think to piggyback on, muscle is expensive. Like, it is, if you want to increase your BMR, we're not getting fatter. We're not adding adipose tissue. We're adding muscle tissue so that I can increase, how many calories. I become a heater, if you will, right? And so the body recognizes that this thing, it requires a lot of energy, and it's one of the first things to start going away as soon as I stop having resistance training. So making sure that I have enough protein along with continuing to exercise to hopefully retain as much of that muscle mass that I've been able to gain or that I currently have is going to be rather important. And there's some things like branched-chain amino acids that can slow down the degradation and increase protein synthesis, like leucine, isoleucine, valine, but specifically leucine definitely being the strongest of all of those guys. Having those guys included in our diet are definitely going to be rather important. I think this conversation also makes me feel really comfortable and makes me feel like, hey, I guess this is an area that I've definitely studied in the past. To be a registered dietitian, I don't know if anybody else knows or recognizes, there is so much training. There's so many hours and hours of training just to become a registered dietitian. I don't know what the exam is like, but I would imagine not the most fun thing in the world. And so I'm definitely not at that level, but it's definitely nice to remember that these are definitely skills within our toolbox. And it's also just as a human being, whether I use these things in practice or not, I think so important just to have a fundamental understanding of what's going on in my body and in my life, and how do I make the right choices at the restaurant, or how do I make the right choices at the grocery store. I think that all of those things are almost like a superpower. I'm very grateful to have that information behind me, and I recognize that not everybody does. And so I think things like these hopefully help other people get a better understanding of how also to take control a little bit more of their own lives as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you are educated, right? There's lots of research on that. So I'm sure the knowledge that you have is massive too. But to add a little bit on that comment, right? Yes, as a registered dietitian, right? Things change now. So anyone that wants to be a dietitian has to have a master's as a requirement now. But we have to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree, right? In food science and nutrition. Do a dietetic internship that is about 1,200 hours, right? Where we do an entry level to become entry level dietitians, essentially, right? We're training. I often say, think of as a doctor, right? Where they do internship or fellowships. Same thing with dietitians, right? And then, the exam is extremely difficult. Nobody wants to take it ever again, but we have to keep up with our educational units, right? Every 5 years, we have 75 units to make sure that we're up to date with research and just education in general. If you don't do that, then you have to take the exam, right? Obviously, nobody wants to take the exam again. But we are board certified. And so essentially we have to keep up with our certification boards.
That's so amazing. There are lots of family practice. There's a lot of doctors that exist, and then give some education on nutrition. But I feel like the information that's provided isn't nearly as maybe in depth or really as fundamentally sound as something that a registered dietitian could offer. Are there those relationships between doctors and dietitians, and then how do those relationships usually work?
Yeah, so things are changing, which is great. And I think that's thanks to social media in a way. But oftentimes when doctors think about dietitians, they think about us in the hospital setting, right? Okay, we just, we get an order, right, for a change of diet or whatever the case may be, or to feed. But they think of us as inpatient, right? And so sometimes when they go into their private practice or their, outpatient, they almost don't think that there are dietitians out there, right? That they can refer their patients out. And so in a way, it's our responsibility as dietitians to be like, hey, I'm here, right? I'm able to support your patients in this way. Because if they don't know, it's like, well, we don't know, we don't know. And so I found that at least locally, right, I have been able to establish strong relationships with different doctors' offices by letting them know, hey, I'm here. This is what I can offer for your patients, and let's work together, right, for the overall well-being of the patient. And so I think, it's just the awareness, right? If the doctor doesn't know, right, how are they going to be able to refer them out if they don't have a way to do that? But sometimes even patients can be advocates and say, hey, I found a dietitian. I just need you to refer me to her or him. And that's another way for doctors to also know that, oh, yeah, there are dietitians out there that can see our patient or can see my patients too, not in a clinical, in an inpatient setting.
That is so neat, and I think motivating for me personally. It's nice to hear because I guess we're kind of transition into the way the business kind of works. As somebody who with a master's degree, like research and definitely experienced in my field of exercise physiology, I am starting to create relationships or starting to reach out to other either doctors, dietitians. Chiropractors, other healthcare providers that, hey, like I'm here and I'm a resource to help treat your patients so that ultimately they get the best case. They get the best service that they possibly could and achieve the results that you are both prescribing them and that I can also provide some guidance or assistance for. And part of me inside is like, I don't know that people are going to refer out to personal trainers. There's something inside of me that says, like, because of the industry or the field, it seems that it's like looked down upon almost. Like, yeah, we're in healthcare, but like we're on the lowest ring of the healthcare world for whatever reason. And I think it's probably because we're not as nearly governed as registered dietitians or doctors, right? I have like 10 certifications that I can get. And then if I really wanted to today, which I am working on, I can create my own educational platform, and then I can get registered with the state. I can sign up for CEUs, and then boom, now I can teach people. Right. And I think that maybe some people who aren't the most educated end up taking that same route and then make the industry maybe less respectable. But I have to remember at the same time that there is a place for preventative healthcare, and it's growing, and that's ultimately what I'm providing. It's making sure that that the other doctors know that we exist, and we exist at different levels, right? There are really, really good trainers, and there are really maybe some online trainers that don't really know what they're doing, right? But it's nice to hear that you have created these relationships, that you are doing these things, and there are looking for those relationships to be built.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I have a doctor's office, it's actually a clinic that this doctor was so good, right? That he would refer their patients to dietitians like me, but also to like a in-town personal training group, right? And I was like, that is amazing. So he's recognizing that, hey, this is a preventative way of treating this patient, right? That is wanting to do more exercise, right? Or move more, and also wanting to focus on their nutrition. And I think we take that off their hands, right? Which is great because they only have so much time to talk to the patient. And I think letting them know that, hey, we're here to, like you said, support your patient in so many ways, right? To be able to give them independence, right? Help them with more mobility or whatever the case may be, right? That way they don't have to worry about that. They can just say, you know what? You will benefit so greatly to go see Ben, right? And he can help you create this amazing plan for you. And I think, those partnerships and collaborations are huge as well. But, it really comes down to the benefit of the client, right? And the patient. Like we are giving these services to help them and support them at a different level, at a preventative level, right? Because we don't want, if we can prevent things, right? Why not do that instead of like, oh, maintaining now? Like now we have to manage this condition. Not to say that that is the end of the world, right? We can still support clients like that. But when we have the opportunity to work on prevention, right? That should be our goal, essentially.
This is, I think, one of the most refreshing conversations that I've had over this specific topic. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, this is a kind of a paradigm shift for me. Like it is, there are a lot of patients or clients that I have that are more in the like we're in maintenance kind of mode, and we already are we already been diagnosed with osteoporosis, and so we can take medication and we can do these things. to help reduce the amount of degradation, but ultimately, like, we are where we're at. Versus there's plenty of clients out there that are just like, hey, I just don't feel good and I just want to be healthy. And they go to their doctor, they get maybe some medication, but instead of that medication, it's like one of the questions being asked is, are you moving? And just making sure that that is part of the normal lexicon. Whenever I went to a psychiatrist several years ago, and it was like a phone conversation, 15 minutes. I was like, I don't feel good. These things are happening. And he was like, all right, well, we're going to put you on this medication. That's it. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. And it was like, you didn't ask me what my sleep is like. You didn't ask me if I'm drinking any alcohol. You didn't ask me if I'm moving. Like, damn, like, I don't want to take this medication. Like, I think I need to take care of those things first before I start taking these other things. So just making sure that it's, part of the normal conversation. How did you create that relationship with that doctor?
Yeah, so I have to reflect back. I think when I started my business, because it was right at the end of 2019, right? And like I sent tons of letters, letting, doctors, I found them in like my roster, and I found their addresses. And obviously the letters went nowhere because it was pandemic time and like people
Sure.
closed their business. But then after that, I think I visited some of the clinics and I took my flyers, like, this is who I am, this is what I offer. And then I went a couple times after that, right, just to remind them. And this is something that I tell, because I have dietetic interns, right, that are coming with me and shadowing me.
Very
And
cool.
so I tell them, if you want to do prior practice, right, you almost want to think of yourself as a pharmaceutical rep, right? When you think of them like that, like they're there all the time, right? And so the doctors know who they are. Okay, this is, Jessica from, I don't know, Pfizer or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you almost want to be like that, right? Like you want to be able to say, okay, that's Ben from IE Health, right? Someone needs a personal trainer, send them to Ben, right? So essentially, that's the case now, right? Like if someone needs a dietitian, oh, we know a dietitian, send them to Leo, right? And then every so often, I stop by and like I take more business cards. I take them something nice for their staff,
Yeah.
just to keep them remembering me, right? Like I'm on top of their mind. And so essentially that's how I built those relationships, or that specific relationship with that clinic. And I followed that for like other clinics too. And yeah, I think that's how I started.
I'll like, this is way, I guess, into the weeds here, maybe for some listeners. But is there any chance I can get a copy of your flyer? Because I mean, that's what I'm kind of continuously doing here in town, and I want to see how maybe you are like formatting your stuff so that whenever I'm going out there, I have one that I've made, but I would like to see some references, because you're doing it, and like that's the coolest thing. Like, being an entrepreneur is not easy, and like we go through all this school to ultimately be able to provide a service, but then you have to, like, there's this part that they don't teach you about. It's like, okay, now you have all the skills. Now you have to find people that are going to pay for those skills, and you're like, oh shit, like I wasn't expecting this part of it. And so, like, learning how to navigate around the specific individuals that you are, like, I don't necessarily want to associate with necessarily another gym, but I want to associate myself with other doctors, attorneys, like private practice individuals, because that's ultimately where I think that I can find my own niche, given that a fact that I am a more educated coach or trainer. And so I just, this is very, very, very refreshing. And I think what you're doing is super cool. And again, I want people to recognize that it is so challenging, one, to be a dietitian, and then two, to be running your own business. And then to also, it sounds like, also bring on new interns. Like, you are out here hustling, and it is so cool, man.
Thank you. I like to give back to the profession, to the community in general, right? But there is so many dietetic interns, right, which are learning to become dietitians. They need a lot of support, right? And so I like to remind my other dietitian colleagues, like you were there at one point, right? Give back to your profession, and it doesn't take a lot. Like you're not paying anything, right? On the contrary, I've had dietetic interests that are amazing, and they help me with like projects and these other work that I have to do, and they give me feedback, and I think that is great, right? You're also benefiting from having them. And yeah, I'll continue to do it for sure because it's one of the ways to give back to my profession. And that's how they're going to learn, right? We definitely need more dietitians. And so it's a great way to
I
do it.
love that. I mean, I started taking on, I used to train trainers. And when I worked at a gym, and then now I've had a couple people that I've had come on, and I remember being the guy who maybe like was like looking for help, and no one was there, and like I just want to learn how to do this thing, and I had to ultimately like develop my own sort of style and whatever, because I didn't have a lot of trainers around me that were willing to like how do you communicate with a client, how do you do a sale, how do you do these things, and so now that I have somebody that's like interested, I'm like, I want to help it any single possible way I can. Like, let's get you to the point where, let's role play, let's shadow, let's, I train you, you train me. Let's like talk about rationales behind like why would you choose this kind of program versus this kind of program. And then ultimately that person gets to go out into the world and they're the better trainer. Like they get to be the best version of themselves. Ultimately, it was still a lot to learn and a lot to experience because they working with people is different than working in a kind of confined environment. But it is so fulfilling to see someone go out and say like, wow, like I'm a better trainer because of the education that I got to have with this other person. I think it's so valuable.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree with that too. And it's just so rewarding. I think as human beings, right, we almost are meant to, give back in a way. It helps us too, right? And if we're able to do it, why not keep doing it too?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps us. I want to find more trainers that I can work with and like provide some information to, like any way that I can help. Like, I think it's super valuable, and hopefully we'll bring on more of a team, and so we'll have more people around us um, under IE Health. But you never know. You never know. There's lots of fun things that can happen, and you're definitely an inspiration to that. And so
Thank
we got to continue our conversation more often outside of just this because I don't know. I want to keep good people in my network, and you definitely seem like you're one of those good people. So, where are you located?
Thank you. I am in Fresno, California, so Central Valley.
Very cool. I've talked about going to California. I'm here in Las Vegas, so I'm not too far away. I've talked about going to Vegas to California for a while, and I still haven't. And so I'll definitely have to make a trip. We can grab some lunch or something like that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to make those connections with other professionals, right? Especially as business owners, because you're so right. It can be such a lonely process, especially when
Ugh.
you're like trying to find at least someone to bounce ideas around. Like there's not like, oh, I have a coworker and I can talk to that coworker about that. And you're like, no, I'm alone here. And
Yeah.
so I think being kind, right, to other people makes a difference too. I've had some other professionals that, I asked a question just as a curiosity and learning, and maybe because it's something that, it's on my radar. And I've had some even some colleagues that are like, no, I can't share that. And I'm like, it's not that I'm going to copy you. Like I just want to know, right, like what the process is or what that has been like for you. And so I think it's so I don't see why we should not share it, right, or support each other or like help each other out, because essentially, right, we're doing different things. We have different businesses, and even if we see ourselves as competitors, right, you can still have a good relationship with that person, right, and bounce ideas around. But I don't know.
I don't like the idea of like I feel like I have always. I gave a speech one time on the podcast or about the podcast to a group, and I remember saying like somebody asked me a question, how do you differentiate yourself from anybody else? And I was like, I am who I am, and this is the podcast. It is what it is. Like how, and then I think the follow up, like, how do you make yourself better than like your competitors? It's like, I don't worry about second place. Like, I don't know. Like, there's enough space for everybody. I'm just gonna be my best self, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm my own competition. And like, I've had so many really cool collaborators on the podcast. I've also had some other people that are like, yeah, I'll I'm gonna charge you $3,000 to go on your podcast, and like, damn, like, okay, I didn't really think that that's what podcasts were about, but I mean, I guess if that's what you're into, that's fine. But that's their own space, and they probably have other competitors within their space that maybe they collaborate with well or not. But at the end of it, there's more than enough space for all of us.
Mhm.
Like, we all, somebody that's gonna love working with me isn't going to like working with that person, and vice versa. Someone might hate working with me because the way I talk or the way, whatever, right? Like, my style, they just don't like that. Versus somebody else could say almost the exact same thing, have the same information, but just say it a little bit differently, and that hits for somebody. And so, like,
Mhm.
I think there's more than enough space, man.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Leo, where can people find you? Are you taking new clients?
Yes, I am taking new clients. So you can find me on Instagram at nutrition underscore with underscore Leonila. I can also send you my website because it's it's weird, but I'll send
Yeah,
it to
I'll
you.
put the link in the bio if you send it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best thing. You can also email me. I'll send you my email, fueledbyleo@gmail.com, or call me at 559-512-0404. Those are the best ways to get in contact with me.
Beautiful. We'll put all those things. We'll put all those things in the description as well. And beautiful. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Uh, yeah, I think back on the preventative aspect of it, right? If you're thinking about doing something for yourself, right, don't wait for the right time. There's never going to be a right time, right? And so just do it, right? Get the help that you need. If it's working out, you can spend hours watching YouTube videos or whatever, but you have someone here, go and ask Ben for that support, right? Same thing with nutrition or anything else that you have in mind that you've been delaying, right? You just have to go for it and do it, because there's never going to be the right time to get it done. And if it's in relationship to your health, my gosh, don't wait, right? Because the longer that you wait, that's wasted time that you could be using it for your overall health.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to end the recording, but we can stay on the call for a little bit after. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to go look at the description and ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of people around you that are more than willing to offer their expertise for the ultimate betterment of your life. And so take advantage of those people. There are good people out there. And so thank you guys for tuning in yet again. And I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you. Love you. Bye bye. That was awesome.
Thank you. It went pretty well, I think.
I would say so as well. Did you get to cover everything you'd like to have gotten covered?
Yeah, I think the conversation went pretty good, so I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad. I had a question.
This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.